Total bullshit. Total bullshit. That's really not how it works. And if that is indeed what your doctor was saying, if you're in the United States, they're completely wrong. Not how it works.
Hey everybody, before we start the show, I want to make a couple disclaimers. This show does cover a wide variety of topics related to mental health and life in general, and some of those could be sensitive for you. I want to simultaneously encourage you to be brave in consuming difficult content, but also respect and recognize your limitations. So please use your best judgment. I will never be offended if you need to skip a question or an episode entirely, but feel free to feel it out, check out the episode, and just see what happens. If you need to skip, that's okay, but feel free to give it a shot first. I also need to say that while I am a psychologist, I'm not your psychologist, and I'm not your therapist. This is not intended to be direct medical advice, and you should not use this as a substitute for professional help. So with those said, let's go ahead and get into the show.
All right. Hello, friends of all varieties. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast, episode 371. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff, aka Duff the Psych. I make mental health content for real people just like you. And today I have a question and answer episode. If you would like to send me a question for the show, please send me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com. Some of you have recently emailed with, several questions in one email, which is totally fine. I'll just keep those. And if there's another episode where a question that you had asked that I haven't gotten to yet would apply, I'll just go back and, plug that in. So that's totally fine. And you guys have done a great job of sending in questions recently. So I very, very much appreciate it. Nothing too extremely intense in this episode, just two really interesting questions of different varieties. I did want to let you know I'm having a bit of a week myself, man. I'm going to ramble about personal stuff for a minute, so if you're not interested in that, just fast forward a couple times. But yeah, today's been a particularly anxious day, and it's been a bit of a rough week in that sort of way. So a lot of you know, my day job is as a neuropsychologist, meaning I kind of test people's brains, do feedback and advice for them, as well as therapy and such. But I've been working in a private practice, like a group practice, for a very long time, since I've been licensed. And there's a lot of benefits to that, right? There's a ton of flexibility. I can basically do whatever I want. But if I have no-shows, I just don't get paid. And, the concept of like vacation is very foreign to me because I could take vacation anytime I want, but I'm not getting paid for it, right? So this week, all of my testing patients, so far, tomorrow is Friday. As I'm recording this is Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. So I don't know if the person's going to show up tomorrow, but there's been something that's gotten in the way every other day this week, like somebody ending up in the hospital or them being confused and not showing up, things like that. And so for all of those, I'm just, out of work. And luckily I have a, kind of diverse collection of things that I do. Writing my book, doing the podcast here, other things like that, which, serve to also support me so I can pivot and do other things. But, I'm at the point right now where I'm, kind of reconsidering what I'm going to be doing with my career. So just for context, I'm just sharing this because, I want you to know that I'm a real person. And I know a lot of you guys have similar kind of struggles with, what you're doing with your life, careers, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's the only reason I'm sharing all of this. So for context, I'm 34 right now. I'm going to be 35 soon. And like I said, I've been working in this private group practice ever since I got licensed. So it's been a few years now. And, it's been very good for the reasons that I listed before. But I also don't have like benefits or anything. And I think a lot of people don't recognize the way that it actually works when you're, say, in private practice versus working for like a larger healthcare organization as a therapist or, any other kind of profession that involves direct patient care, because I have to pay for the insurance for my whole family out of pocket. There are lots of other fees like, getting the privacy certificates for Zoom so that I can do online stuff and be HIPAA compliant. Licensure is always needing to be paid to renew. There is insurance, malpractice insurance, which is not cheap. There are phone lines to pay for because it has like a virtual phone line. all sorts of shit like that. And then, of course, insurance isn't covered. So all of this is to say I'm at a transitional point right now where I am thinking about just kind of getting a job, not within a different field or anything, but like working for somewhere like, say, UCLA. I'm in California, so like UCLA or Cedars-Sinai or any of the other hospitals in the area, maybe a larger healthcare network or something like that, where I would have less flexibility, but a lot more stability. And I think at this point in my life with my family and things like that, the thought of like having paid time off makes me like choke up a little bit. I'm like, fuck, that would be really nice. So yeah, I'm still in the process of figuring out what to do about this, but there's been a few of these kind of weeks recently where there's a bit of a wake up call, and I do need to make a change for myself. So all of this is to say, if you're well established in a career already, that doesn't mean you can't make changes. And let's say I do go work for a bigger organization for a while and I realize I hate it, then I can stop. I can always pivot again and do something different. Most people change career paths or their focus at least multiple times in their life, even if it's, within kind of the same field. So not beating myself up about that, but it is anxiety inducing and a little intimidating and such. So that's kind of where my head is at today. But that is more than enough about me. If you've listened through that, thank you for listening. This has been my little personal 5-minute therapy session. And why don't we go ahead and get into the actual questions here. So here's the first question, and there's a little bit of context because this person wrote in several questions in one email, like I mentioned earlier. So the context is they're 27 years old, they're a man, and they've been going to therapy for 2 years, and they recently came off SSRIs, which are kind of the most common antidepressant or anti-anxiety medications, after being on them for 1.5 years. So they're, off them just recently. So the question is, recently I've been seeing somebody that I previously dated. We had broken up about 8 months ago, but still remained in contact for the first 7 months, up to the last one where we completely cut ties from one another. I thought the situation was completely over, so I ended up sleeping with somebody else numerous times. My ex has recently come back into my life and has been really seeking a relationship with me again. She is diagnosed with BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, which has been something that really affected our relationship previously, but I can't stop thinking about all the fun memories we shared together. I constantly think about getting back with her, but I can't seem to forgive myself for sleeping with somebody else while we were broken up. She hasn't asked about it, but I know if I tell her what happened while we were broken up, she will be extremely upset. This is a pretty jumbled backstory, but my question is, how can I find some ways to forgive myself? I feel like as if I cheated on her, even though I wasn't with her at the time. So, great question. Thank you. It sounds like it's been a really rough time for you over the past year or so. So I am sorry to hear that. I don't blame you at all for feeling mixed up about this, but my primary concern in answering this question is to reassure you right off the bat, you didn't do anything wrong, right? Unless you had some type of agreement between the two of you, meaning you and the person you were dating before, unless you had some sort of agreement that was consensual, that was not coerced, it just, an agreement between the two of you, you were broken up for a number of months. You were not in a relationship. You were single. So there's no reason that you could not have other relationships. There's no reason that you couldn't have romantic or sexual experiences with other people during that time. Again, unless that was part of some sort of agreement that I don't know. At the end of your question, you said, what are some ways that I could forgive myself? I think that's a little bit off the mark here. I think that the work here is really to understand that you didn't do anything wrong as long as there wasn't something explicitly stated that you were going to stay celibate or that you weren't going to date other people, or if there was a specific timeline for your break. That's an area where sometimes people get into more murky territory where it's like, hey, let's take a break. Maybe we will reconvene in a month or two and see what things are like. And during that time, there's a question of what you should and shouldn't be doing with yourself. But that doesn't sound like the situation here, right? So the work here is to understand that you didn't do anything wrong. It sounds like you guys broke up and you didn't expect to get back together. But now you find yourself in a situation where that could potentially happen. And so you regret sleeping with other people. Maybe. I don't know if you regret it or if you're just worried about it. But you have feelings about sleeping with other people. And maybe you wouldn't have done that if you knew that you would end up seeing each other again. But you having sex with somebody else months after breaking up with this person has nothing to do with this person that you previously dated. It doesn't mean that you didn't like her or that you don't like her. It doesn't mean that you have no respect for her. It simply means that you were single and you wanted to have sex with somebody that presumably also wanted to have sex with you, which is great, groovy, good. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, before we continue, let's take a quick break and talk about our sponsor. Today, the episode is sponsored by OneSkin. Right now it's October, and as I'm looking outside, it is still so bright and sunny. It's 87. It's going to be in the 90s today. And as much as I love going out, walking around town, working outside, all of that, the sun really, really does take a toll on your skin. And it's important to have something in your routine that helps to mitigate that damage. OneSkin is an awesome company. They're the world's first skin longevity company, and it addresses skin health at the molecular level by treating the root cause of aging. They have a peptide that they invented, and it's been shown by a 12-week clinical study performed by a third party to improve the skin barrier, improve skin markers, and diminish visible signs of aging in 87% of users. It's super easy. They just have, one or two products, and all you do is you just integrate it into your morning, your evening routine, 2 squirts, rub it in, and you're good to go. The packaging is very neutral. It looks great. It's very attractive, and all of their stuff is refillable. So that's a little bit of a bonus to the environment. And I've been really happy with my experience using it, especially because, like I said, I'm spending a lot of time out in the sun, and I just want to take a little bit better care of my skin. So you could check it out yourself if you want to get started with your new face, eye, and body routine at a discounted rate. Get 15% off with the code DUFF at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code DUFF. We only have one body, one skin. Only you can choose to make it better. Age healthy with OneSkin. All right, let's get back to the question. That's business between you and whoever you ended up having sex with. That's not your former partner's business, right? So when you talk about, her not knowing or not asking about it, maybe she's not asking about it because she's aware that that's not really her business. There's always a privacy component when it comes to, a third party in this equation, and you having slept with them. Is that anybody else's business? It may not be. And so, if anything, the only information that she may need to know is anything that would inform her sexual health and decision making, right? So like, for instance, if you'd had sex with somebody recently that wasn't her and you haven't been tested since then, that maybe is something that she needs to know. But the details, who it is, things like that, that's not necessarily her business. Now, a bigger wrinkle to all of this is the fact that your former partner that you mentioned has borderline personality disorder, so BPD. And from what you said, it sounds like this has been diagnosed by a healthcare provider. So that's significant. I've done other episodes on borderline before, so I'm not going to go into all the details. If you want to know more about it, I have a lot of episodes that you can go to. So episode 103, 112, 228, 246, 262, and 354. All of those mention borderline in different contexts. I give more back information about it, as well as how to apply it. Even one of those is about relationships. So definitely check those ones out. 103, 112, 228, 246, 262, 354. And I'll make sure I put all this in the show notes, so there's links to those and you can find that. But with borderline, there are a few traits that you tend to see. So first off, somebody with borderline, they may tend to be more sensitive to rejection than other people. It's a very common one. They also tend to have what I call like a boom and bust pattern, an up and down pattern in relationships, which means they tend to fall hard and fast. And this could be romantic or platonic or even parasocial. It doesn't necessarily matter. The tendency, though, is to connect very quickly. They come on strong, they get attached quickly, build a very strong bond, and they may be very, very good at it. That's the thing. A lot of people with BPD are also very, charismatic. They might have the ability to form relationships more quickly than most people. But from there, they're going to be very sensitive to signs of disrespect or rejection, abandonment, or discord within the relationship. Abandonment is a huge one, feeling like they're going to be rejected or abandoned. And so maybe they act out in ways that sort of bring that about. It's a complicated disorder, but it is very, very much centered in relationships, right? Another strong aspect of BPD is strong emotional reactions. So a lot of people with borderline have a hard time regulating their emotional reactions, and the reactions that they have go beyond what would be expected for most other people. So in this case, I kind of insinuated this earlier, but I wonder if maybe you're kind of conflating guilt with fear in this case. What I mean is maybe you don't actually feel bad about what you did, sort of in isolation. But really what it is you're feeling scared because you know what her reaction might be. You know her tendency to be reactive. And so you're like, oh crap, I feel like I did something wrong because of her reaction, not because you morally feel like you did something that would be unacceptable. You know, that the concept of sleeping with another person while you were single and not dating was bad. It may not be that. But everybody with BPD is different. So I would trust your intuition about how she might respond, given that you've previously been in a relationship together. You know, you can look at the patterns, you can look at how things had been with you guys throughout the duration of your relationship. And if you sense that she would feel betrayed and upset despite you not actually doing anything technically wrong, you may be right. Your gut may be right in the situation. And that's worth taking into account about how you would respond or what information you would bring to the table. Now, I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not trying to paint people with borderline personality disorder as the enemy. People with BPD are worthy and capable of love just like anybody else. But it does mean that there are a unique set of circumstances and considerations that need to be thought of when you're in a relationship with somebody that has borderline. This is also the case for many other physical or mental health issues. It just is the case that borderline is very much centered within relationships. That's often where you see the symptoms. Now, you mentioned that BPD has significantly affected your relationship, but you can't stop thinking of all the fun times you had together. And that is totally typical. That's kind of the name of the game. You're going to have really, really high highs. You're going to have great experiences. Like I said, a lot of people with BPD can be very magnetic, can be very charming, and you can have really awesome times with them because of the strength of that part of their character. But you also sometimes have these very low lows or these sudden switches and this intensity, this roller coaster ride that makes it difficult. And this is all stuff that you need to consider when it comes to the potential of getting back together. Depending on how long you had previously been together, how serious things are, you may consider pursuing couples therapy. If you're not in regular therapy already, and she's not in regular therapy already, these also may be things that would limit your success in the relationship after this off period. So you may think about pulling in some additional help. But ultimately, I can't tell you what to do with yourself in terms of returning to a romantic relationship with this person. Only you know about the special connection that the two of you share. But I do want to encourage you not to beat yourself up for having slept with somebody else. That's absolutely not cheating. You were single. It may be true that if you were to reveal this to her, she might feel betrayed or angry, and that's her prerogative. And she's absolutely allowed to feel how she feels, but that's not on you. Right? If you do get back together, I would say that this is a great prompt for you guys to focus more on clear and open communication and expectations about boundaries within the relationship. And this will help you because it's for many situations, but especially if somebody has borderline in the relationship, having these boundaries, having these clear expectations, this helps you to take the guesswork out of it. And it gives you a real metric to judge yourself by, right? You know, there are situations where maybe guilt is an appropriate thing to feel, but you don't want to base those feelings just on the conflict that may be going on between you or the strong feelings that she's exhibiting. Instead, you can base them off of what you previously agreed to. You're like, we had these rules or we had these boundaries and I violated them and that's bad. I feel guilty about that. I need to do better. Totally appropriate. But that's not what we're talking about here, I don't think. So establish those things if you do get in a relationship together again. And I hope that these thoughts are helpful to you. I don't have too much more to say here. You didn't do anything wrong. I understand why you feel the risk here. And if you do pursue a relationship with this person again, try to do it in a way that helps take the guesswork out of it by focusing on things like boundaries. Thank you. Okay, before moving on, let's take a quick break to talk about our other sponsor. Today, the episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As I mentioned at the top, I've been having a bit of a time recently, and we all get there sometimes, right? There's times when things are supposed to be going all right, but our brain keeps getting in the way. Maybe it's keeping us up at night trying to work through things. Maybe we're just replaying conflicts in our head with no resolution. And it's hard to figure out exactly what to do about that and what's holding you back. So therapy is an option, though therapy isn't always very accessible to everybody. BetterHelp is something that can help with that. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your own schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and that will get you matched with a licensed therapist. If you need to switch therapists at any time, you can do so for no additional charge. And as I said, it's very convenient. You can do this from the app on your phone, you can do it on the computer, and you can do it from anywhere. So very, very easy to get started. So let's work on making our brains our friends with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Duff today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Duff for 10% off your first month. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, on to the second question. It reads, "Good day, Dr. Duff. Your show is super helpful and informative. Keep up the real life content. My question, post-pandemic, public adaptation has been an issue for me." Oh, sorry. The subject here is about phones. So they're talking about phones, cell phones. "Public adaptation has been an issue for me. I'm having issues with cell phones in general. I'm a conversation and storytelling in person kind of guy. I'm not a social media life sharing person. I'm finding cell phones annoying, and I feel like people are doing everything and anything to get a video or picture to post in both public and private groups. I know I can't stop what people do with their phones in public spaces, but it bothers me, especially if their phone is pointed at me. I'm surprised at how much it's bothering me. I went to my doctor and asked to be referred to a therapist. He wanted to prescribe meds, and said I needed a history of taking meds before I see a therapist. I disagree. How can I not feel annoyed, ignore it, and live on top of this?" So really good question. Thank you. And also thank you for the praise about the show. I appreciate you listening. In the question here, I'm seeing kind of two different sections, two different questions. So I'm going to try to address them separately. The first one is about being bothered by the feeling that people are always on their phones and that phones are basically intruding on actually having interactions and navigating the world. The second one is about your doctor and them wanting you to take medications before seeing a therapist. So let's start with the phone part. You are absolutely allowed to have your feelings about phones. You're allowed to be a person that prefers having one-on-one conversations and experiences with others that don't involve phones. And that's great for you. That's awesome. There's many people who are like you out there who would totally be on the same page about just wanting to sit down and have a chat with somebody without phones getting in the way. But we do have to recognize that this is where the world is going. And while there was already a significant shift toward digital interactions over the past, say, decade or so, the pandemic definitely accelerated this, right? Many people turn to technology as a primary mode of connecting with other people because they couldn't really spend time in proximity to other people during especially the height of the pandemic. So I think it's natural that for you as somebody who values in-person communication and that sort of one-on-one feeling, you might feel uncomfortable. You might feel like a bit of a fish out of water with this sudden increase in the already substantial focus on technology and internet-based communication. Now, one thing you mentioned is your feelings of being bothered when it feels like people are pointing their phones at you. This is an interesting thing to point out. In this day and age, it's totally valid to be concerned about privacy. I wouldn't fault you on that. And when you're in public settings, there's really nothing to stop people from observing or recording you. That said, you should recognize that much of the time, people are not actually focused on you, given that they're probably recording for social media or live streaming or taking photos or videos for loved ones. Their focus is much more sort of selfish. It's on themselves and the environment, and they're probably not just trying to record you. Of course, there are exceptions. There are people out there that act like creeps, and you're totally allowed to be concerned with that. And there are people that are somewhat malicious in their intent, filming things like pranks or sharing pictures of people in poor taste, like a joke or a meme online. And so, yeah, there are situations where you could be concerned about that. For the most part, you're not really going to be able to stop people from using their phones in the way that they want to. But if you are concerned that somebody might be taking a video or picture of you without your consent, you're well within your rights to approach them and say, "Hey, are you filming me? Are you taking a picture of me? It looked like it was pointed in my direction." And get an answer from them. And if they are, you can ask them to stop. Obviously, depending on where you live, the rules and laws are different. In most cases, from what I understand, there's not much you can do about it in public. If, from a legal sense, people don't need your consent to film out in public spaces, but, definitely approaching them on an individual basis may empower you. And aside from changing the situation around you, another way to navigate this is to work on reframing the way that you think of people using technology. Given your perspective, I think that you feel as though phones are taking people out of the moment and making them disconnected from others. And that kind of irks you. Instead, one of the ways to think about this is think about the ways that people use phones as tools to connect, to share, and to document their lives. It's nothing personal about you. It's just the way that they navigate the world and connect with people. And you don't have to join in. You don't have to adopt the same behaviors, but understanding them and having some empathy for the way that, the people that are annoying you, having empathy for the way that they might be living their lives, that can help you to feel less annoyed. So when you find yourself making negative assumptions about what somebody's doing on their phone or about what the phone use implies about their character, try to push yourself to also imagine that they are using their phone for something that's very meaningful for them. Right? So for example, maybe they are a very shy person and that's held them back in life, even before phones were so ubiquitous. But they're very shy and they found that they can make friends online and they have friends in a variety of places, maybe other cities, maybe other countries. And what they're doing with their phones out in public is sharing pictures with their group chat or video with their group chat so that everybody can kind of know what's going on in each other's world. That would be pretty cool for them. I had this recently happen at a concert as well. I know a lot of people get annoyed when you go to live music and people have their phones out and they're just recording it. And I could understand that to an extent, especially when the whole crowd seems like it's just full of phones. But at one that I was at recently, somebody was streaming the entire show for somebody else and they had their phone up the entire time. And it was on FaceTime. It wasn't even like recording video that they're going to share later. They were actually live streaming it to another person over FaceTime. And at first, this kind of irked me. I was like, what are you doing? Why aren't you just like watching the show? Why is this light, shining in my face? But then I thought about it and thought about what would happen if, say, I was going to a show with, a partner or a friend, and at the last minute, they suddenly had to cancel because maybe they got sick, they were throwing up, they got COVID, something like that, and they just couldn't go, but they really, really wanted to. So I thought about that. I'm like, well, going without them, but letting them share the experience over FaceTime might be a really nice thing to do as a consolation since they can't actually be there and they're devastated about that, right? So maybe this person was filming for somebody that was in the hospital or, just couldn't come for some reason. And that really softened the feeling that I had about it. I didn't want to have the light in my face necessarily, but it wasn't like a personal judgment of that other person being like, what are you doing? You're being an idiot, that sort of thing. There are many different possibilities. We can come up with all the hypotheticals, but the idea is you challenge yourself to see things from different perspectives with the hope that that maybe diffuses the intensity of that annoyance that you feel. And then, on your side, like I said, you don't have to join in. You can instead embrace your preference for in-person communication. You can participate in activities that don't lend themselves to being stuck on your phone. Like, for example, I went recently to a trivia at a bar, went out with, two of my friends and my wife, and we had a great time. And in that situation, you aren't even allowed to use your phones because they don't want you cheating, right? So it was just all, face to face and interacting with the crowd and with each other. Similarly, if you took a class or maybe you went to a get together where people play card games or board games, these are situations that, you might not run into as much technology. Now, ironically, Facebook is a really great place to find those types of things. So looking for events on Facebook or going and finding a local Facebook group and seeing what people are posting about, these are ways to look for activities. And so you can do a bit of both. You can, use the technology to help you find places where you're not going to be as bogged down by technology. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. Now to the second part of your question about your doctor wanting you to get medication before seeking therapy. Total bullshit. Total bullshit. That's really not how it works. And if that is indeed what your doctor was saying, if you're in the United States, they're completely wrong. Not how it works. Usually therapy is considered the first line of treatment for mental health concerns, and this can be done with or without medication. What the research says is that the effect sizes for both are pretty similar, and they can be done together to be even better. So, if you can get some therapy and manage well without medications, in most cases, that's preferred. Why would we want to put someone on medication for something that they don't need it for? Right? That's like saying, okay, we need to put you on these painkillers and muscle relaxants before we give you physical therapy. It just doesn't make sense. So your intuition that you don't agree, very wise. I have never heard of your doctor insisting that you must try meds before therapy. The opposite is sometimes true. I've definitely seen situations where doctors really, really want you to be in therapy if you're taking medications. But even that I wouldn't say is very appropriate. It's not really appropriate for your physical health providers to hold your medications ransom like that. So in this case, like I said, unless there's context that I'm not aware of, you're in another country or there's something else going on there, I would just ignore that doctor. And in most cases, you don't need to find a therapist through your doctor. You don't need to get a referral to go to therapy. You can just do an outpatient thing. Go to Psychology Today, search within your area, filter by therapists that take your insurance. From there, look at all their different profiles. And if you find somebody that you like, just reach out to them directly and don't even worry about talking to your doctor about it. Now, for medications, that's going to be a different story. If you do want them at some point, those have to be prescribed by an MD, like a medical doctor, not a therapist. But it sounds like you don't even want medications at this point. So you can find yourself a therapist that's a good fit and just go straight to them. And of course, if you feel like this misinformation from your doctor is indicative of a bigger overall issue with your care, you're definitely well within your rights to find another primary care physician. You don't have to settle for that. So thank you for the question. That's about what I have for you. For the first part, there are some things that you can do to kind of reframe the situation, and you can also embrace, your part of the equation in being somebody who enjoys face-to-face experiences. For the second part, your doctor is basically talking out of their ass. That's not true. You can find a therapist if you want, and I'm very proud of you for thinking about seeking therapy to help you deal with this stuff. So that's the episode, everybody. This has been episode 371 of the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. If you guys want show notes, go to duffthepsych.com/episode 371. And if you'd like to send me a question for a future episode of the show, go to your email and email me at duffthepsych@gmail.com. All right, take care of yourselves. I hope that you're doing well, and I will see you for the next episode. Bye.